How do I see Egypt fitting into the long war? I don't know. Who expected Egypt? What it shows is there goes 50 years of Machiavellian intrigue and billions of dollars constructing an alliance between the United States and the most powerful of the Arab nations, building it around an alliance for peace with Israel, all gone, all falls down. How did it happen? Well, through obviously the humiliation of national pride, the poverty, the arrests, the torture. This is the place where Al-Qaeda was actually born, in the dungeons of Egypt. And I have a feeling that it's far from over, but that Al-Qaeda was right, is going to be prophetic in calling for this. But I think the real moving forces here are kind of the Al Jazeera generation, the younger people who used Facebook and other tools to build the April 6th movement, a lot of young people, and the demands should be democracy and free elections. And I think it's not over, but it's not only not over in Egypt, it's not over in the rest of the Arab world. I wonder what the neocons are thinking who wanted democracy to come to the Middle East. I wonder what the Israelis are thinking. Hopefully, it will be a positive realignment that will accelerate some solution to the question of the Palestinian state. But I think it's more about a process of recovery of dignity and well-being for a very brutalized country. The emphasis will probably be on the domestic politics of Egypt for a good long time. Melissa, how can we influence young people to refuse recruitment on school campuses? Well, I don't know if you can get them to refuse recruitment, but I think the issue is information. I think obviously school boards shouldn't be collaborating with the recruiters, and principals shouldn't be collaborating. They've got their free speech rights, but they are really set up. They've got these uniforms and this information. They have all kinds of programs that make you think you're not going to war, you're going to some preparatory academy for a job. And all that's really necessary is to organize some young people to demand a debate with the recruiters on campus or in front of the campus on the street. And leaflets can be designed that go straight to the lies. I don't mind military recruitment. I really, really am angry about recruiters who lie. That is the issue, it seems to me. How can schools and campuses not promote both sides of the discussion, especially when so many young people's lives are at stake? Why do you think that more activists are not connecting the environment with militarism? I think that for practical reasons, many people are involved in so-called single-issue groups, movements, the environmental movement being one of the greatest. And it takes all their time. And often we hear, if we become connected to other issues, will we be divided? Will we lose membership? Will we lose resources? And so on. So there's a case for single-issue groups relating to each other but keeping their own integrity. But at the rank-and-file level, at the people level, there's no reason for anything but unity. These wars are fought, among other reasons, for permanent access to oil, natural gas, minerals, pipelines. The national security policy of the United States is to consider Middle Eastern oil a national security issue. It couldn't be plainer than that. And the environmental movement, if it's serious about air pollution and contaminants, has got to be against wars for oil. And those who are involved in trying to stop these wars should include the energy question, which I was going to bring up in future weeks. But right now, the irony, is a horrific irony, is the Pentagon is developing solar panels so as to position and supply special forces units in remote outposts in the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan. We should not let solar energy be developed by these policies of war, because the wars are destroying the environment and depleting the energy supplies. Does lobbying have any effect in the face of money? Yes. I want to issue an appeal. Anybody who's doing research out there, our broad movement really needs to go back to the question of how much the military contractors for Afghanistan and Iraq have contributed in campaign contributions, and how much more freely they'll be able to contribute under the Citizens United ruling of the Supreme Court. I think parallel to that, the only way to end the pernicious influence of that money is by encouraging single-issue groups like Common Cause, of course, but also if our politicians think they're entitled to ask a judicial applicant candidate their feelings about reproductive rights or abortion or other issues, we've got to come to the point where they're asked in public, how do they feel, what is the relationship between money and politics? Do they think specifically that the more money that's thrown out in elections, thrown around in elections, is the exercise of the First Amendment, or is it the destruction of the First Amendment? I think money allows you to have a corporate candidate raise the noise level so high that grassroots candidates cannot be heard. That's a violation of the First Amendment. Money is not the instrumentality of speech, and it's a violation of the due process provisions of our Constitution as well. Sharon Rose, how do we counteract media misinformation? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that whole question. We'll come back to it. Susan, one way to diffuse recruiters is to have students live Skyping with Afghan youth peace volunteers. Excellent. Thank you. Brenda, I was charged 1990 threat to state defending Alaska. What? How is the Patriot Act going to prevent activists? I'm not quite clear on the historical narrative there, but the Patriot Act is already being expanded to criminalize nonviolent support of groups that are engaged in violence under the classification of material support. Let me give you an example, because that sounds confusing. I was a big supporter of the Republican movement in Northern Ireland, and of course they were involved in a 30-year armed struggle with the British forces and their client forces in the north. And there were all kinds of people working on a peace process which required giving advice to and dialogue with and relating to the armed units of the Republican movement. Not that they were going to listen to North Americans, but there was no avoiding those kinds of relationships. Now that would be considered a violation of the Patriot Act, and that is what anybody is facing who today has any relationship with armed movements or allegedly armed movements in developing countries. And Congress has got to take a different look at that immediately. Bob, what do I think of the pros and cons of supporting a third party or an independent candidate in 2012? It's about that time, isn't it? I think it would have to be a candidate that I can't think of, so formidable. The only one who comes to mind is Michael Moore, because he's witty and he knows that he wouldn't be running to win, and he would probably get into good dialogues with Barack Obama. That isn't going to happen. I think there might be some independent candidates out there, but for all kinds of reasons, Obama is going to be the nominee. For one thing, just from my experience, when 95% of the African American community is for a candidate, I'm likely to be for that candidate. When most of the Latinos in Los Angeles are for a candidate, when all of organized labor is for a candidate, come on, environmentalists, that's the base of progressive politics, and people make their decisions about candidates in terms of what's in their own interest. So then it becomes how to put pressure on in every imaginable way to convince him that he needs the peace movement, he needs the peace vote to win in 2012. He's lost a lot of the peace vote, the progressive vote, as I said earlier, and I think Barbara Lee is right in saying all we can do is put pressure on him to change his political calculation and try to run as a candidate in 2012, a candidate who is ending two wars instead of sinking us in two quagmires. Do I think the revolution in Egypt will illuminate the efficacy of bottom-up change? Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like it. We're at the popular uprising stage in the course of a social movement here. I have to remind you, there's a euphoria, but remember, it's also bottom-up for a very painful reason. Organized opposition has been banned, made illegal, tortured. There hasn't been, even the Muslim Brotherhood has been on a very, very tight leash. So the reason it has to be bottom up is that there's no intermediate level of political parties or civic society. It all has to be rebuilt at the same time, and as a result, there's a vacuum into which a lot of opportunistic elements will arise. So it has its pros and cons.